Hey guys, thanks for watching today. This is pretty much going to be part 2 of the last video called the Incursion, and I was just basically talking about how the Watchers came down to unite with human women to produce giants, and it's pretty basic stuff, really. And from a lot of the people that I've met over the past 2 years, this is common knowledge. But I know that I'm probably speaking to a few people who these concepts are new, and that's what I try to do. I try to, I don't try to teach people, but I try to share what I've learned. So that's what I'm doing. I just want to share a lot of the information that has really woke me up. Okay. So, and this was a big deal. This event, we don't hear about this when we read our Bibles. We gloss right over Genesis chapter 6 because it's written really vague in the English translation that we have. Okay, so where I left off in the last video was how a lot of people, they don't believe that angels can unite with women, because Jesus said in the book of Mark, or maybe Matthew 22:30, he said to the Sadducees, "For in the resurrection they neither marry nor are given in marriage, but are as the angels of God in heaven." Talking about humanity in our post-resurrection state, we will be like the angels who were not designed to marry. And people will use that verse to say that Genesis 6 is not talking about angels uniting with women, because angels can't, and Jesus affirmed that. Well, it's usually coming from people who, it comes from people who don't know about the book of Enoch, have never referenced it, or they don't know where Christ gets his statement. Now, what's funny is that, why would Christ think that? Where would he have gotten that information from? Like, if you look through the entire Old Testament of the 66 book canon that we have called the Bible, you're not going to find any reference to this, what he's referring to. But when you open up the book of Enoch to chapter 15, there's no question that he was referencing that passage. And so what Christ was saying, he wasn't saying that angels can't unite with human women. He was talking about how they went against their design. He was referencing that text where it affirms how these angels went against their design. They rebelled against God and came down and laid with women. They defiled themselves with the daughters of men and have begotten giants. Okay, that's just what the text says. So, matter of fact, why don't I get it up? I want to get it up there. We already went over that. This is just a few verses from that context, from verses 2 and 7. Okay, so yeah, Enoch chapter 15, verses 2 through 7 talks about this in detail. Matter of fact, if you read up to chapter 15 in the book of Enoch, from chapter 1 to chapter 15, there are a lot of details. Okay, so I'm just going to move on a little bit, kind of where I left off last week. Yeah, Christ, he was reminding the Sadducees that angels were not meant to unite with women, even though they did. And his reference, it was intended as a comparison. We're going to understand once we get to heaven that, marriage will no longer serve a purpose as far as one man and one woman. Okay. Because we won't need to procreate. The account that we just read in Enoch, it demonstrates that angels do have the capability of uniting with female women. Okay, they just rebelled against their design to do so. And the angels that participated in the incursion, they're identified as males in the book of Enoch. And let me see if I have that written down. Enoch chapter 6 and verse 4 refers to the leader as a him. Okay. So, anyway, moving on. But one of the most affirmative pieces of evidence that we have for this sons of God, people are like, no, sons of God doesn't mean angels, it means men. Okay, so that's what we're talking about now. Sons of God. How do we know the sons of God are angels? Well, we do comparison. I believe I actually resolved that in the last video, but if we look at Job 1, verse 6, and verse 2 and 1, they essentially say the same thing. There was a day when the sons of God came to present themselves before Yahuwah. And there's no debate about who the sons of God are in this context, okay? We're dealing with angels. And in later chapters, we read about the foundation of the earth when the morning stars sang together and all the sons of God shouted for joy. That's in Job. Well, the transliterated phrase "sons of God," it's taken from the Hebrew word or words "bina he Elohim." Okay, and it's used only in reference to angels. All right, and it's the same Hebrew phrasing that's found in Genesis 6. Okay, that's how we know. I mean, if you word studies are very beneficial. They're very easy. You don't have to be fluent in the Hebrew language to do a simple word study. And so it helps to be fluent. It helps to know more about the language. But if you can do a word study and compare the text with other texts that use those same words, it's going to fill in a lot of gaps. Okay? I hope that makes sense. Okay, but even if we, aside from Job, all right, we can look at all right, I'm losing my place. I'm sorry. So what was my point? My point was that even if we took the sacred ancient text, the book of Enoch, and these other books that talk about these divine, these watchers that came down, all right, even if we took those away, the Hebrew derivative would support our case, comparing the book of Job to the book of Genesis, okay, and looking at those Hebrew words. But still, there is more evidence. Okay, let's look at the ISV, the International Standard Version of this passage. Okay, the International Standard Version. It's the first modern Bible translation in any language to provide an exclusive textual apparatus comparing the text of the famed Dead Sea Scrolls with the traditional Masoretic text of the Hebrew. Okay, they used both. Is what it sounds like, and this is what it was talking about in Bible Gateway. It was telling a little bit about this Bible version, so that's why I like the ISV. Because it compared those. Anyway, let's read this. The Nephilim. Look at that. The Nephilim. It doesn't call them giants in the ISV. It calls them Nephilim. Okay. The Nephilim were on the earth at that time and also immediately afterward when those divine beings, not sons of God, but divine beings is how it's worded here, were having sexual relations with those human women who gave birth to children for them. These children became the heroes and legendary figures of ancient times. So, here we have an English version of Genesis 6:4. It calls the giants Nephilim, and it calls the sons of God divine beings. Okay? So, I love that translation. That's good. People should refer to that. Okay, let me get back to my notes up here. Yeah, it makes it abundantly clear that we're dealing with angelic beings, not men. So there's really no question. During the days of Noah, unnatural breeding occurred between angels and women. And the other point, I already mentioned it, Nephilim. The word Nephilim is used there. It's talking about, it refers to the fallen ones. Okay. And one thing I mentioned in the last video, I elaborate a little bit on this right here, is that one aspect that's often overlooked is the intricate detail of each form of creation, including plants, sea creatures, birds, and other beasts of the earth. And biblical creationists, a lot of times they will observe the phrasing in Genesis to refute the theory of evolution. For instance, God brought forth each type of creation after his kind. That's the phrasing that is used, after his kind. It means that each plant, animal, or sea creature was fashioned in detail according to a specific design. And this not only challenges the theory of evolution, it gives us an inside look at God's intentions. He created multiple plants and animals with specific attributes. He categorized everything. He categorized it separately. He emphasized a distinction between everything. And above all, he considered the final product to be good. It even says, and God saw that it was good. That's in Genesis verse 1, or chapter 1, verse 12, verse 21, verse 25. You'll see that a lot. God saw that it was good. He said that about each category of plant, animal, and sea creature. He had a specific design for each and every form of creation. So in simple terms, he laid it out the way it was supposed to be, okay? He didn't want his creation to reproduce any differently. What he initially designed was already perfect. It didn't need any modification. Humankind was made in God's image after his likeness. Both Genesis and Jasher affirm this. All right? Or in any other book that affirms the creation account. Okay? So when Adam and Eve initially sinned, it was this image that was distorted. Their image. They were created in the image of God. That image was distorted. They were blemished. And their disobedience compromised their status. It was the consequences of their decision removed them from their original state, basically. All right, but that was only the beginning, really. This was the initial fall of man, okay? As time would allow, there was a point when God looked upon all the earth and he saw that it was corrupt. For all flesh had corrupted his way on earth, is what the Bible says. And so throughout the entire context of both the biblical account and the sacred ancient texts, we see an order of events that led up to the flood. Christ revealed that God would separate the sheep from the goats, or the wheat from the chaff. So during the time of Noah, we get a firsthand look at this side of God's sovereignty, okay? And here it is, right here. I had it pulled up on the screen. And God looked upon the earth, and behold, it was corrupt, and all flesh had corrupted its orders, and all that were upon the earth had wrought all manner of evil before his eyes. And he said that he would destroy man and all flesh upon the face of the earth, which he had created. But Noah found grace before the eyes of the Lord. and against the angels whom he had sent upon the earth. He was exceedingly wroth, and he gave commandment to root them out of all their dominion. And he bade us to bind them in the depths of the earth, and behold, they are bound in the midst of them, and are kept separate. And that is taken from Jubilees 5, verses 3 and 6. So, yeah, it really puts things into perspective, especially when you compare Peter and Jude's epistles with the text from Jubilees and the book of Enoch, all that. When you compare it all, the act of mixing species, however you want to say it, that is detestable in the sight of God. He called his creation good in its original state. But Genesis and the sacred ancient texts, all these books, they all reveal how God feels about these actions. Okay? And Jubilees says all flesh had corrupted its orders. It was a forbidden act of evil, basically. So even the angel who organized the incursion, and we're going to talk about Semyaza. There we go. Semyaza. I have to do that. It's my OCD kicking in. Okay. Semyaza, he believed that he would be committing an act worthy of condemnation. Check it out. Enoch 6, verse 3 and 4, he says, and Semyaza, who was their leader, said unto them, I fear that you will not indeed agree to do this deed. He was trying to talk them into going with him, okay? And I alone shall have to pay the penalty of a great sin. And they all answered him and said, let us all swear an oath, and all bind ourselves by mutual imprecations, not to abandon this plan, but to do this thing. Wow. Isn't that something? And from there, we read about the most devastating event in the book of Enoch, or in the book of Genesis. In all the corresponding texts, they all go together, okay? It was the dreadful incursion. And interestingly, I don't know if I've continued my notes here. I do. I have them. I was hoping I'd be a little more organized than this. Jubilees, it refers to this as the beginning of uncleanness. For owing to these three things came the flood upon the earth, namely, owing to the fornication wherein the watchers against the law of their ordinances went a-whoring after the daughters of men. And that's a really interesting phrase right here, because against the law of their ordinances. When I talked earlier about them going against their design, and Christ was not telling the Sadducees that angels can't, that he wasn't telling them that angels can't unite with women. He was referring to the time when they went against the law of their ordinances to do so. They weren't designed to do this. All right? And took themselves wives of all which they chose, and they made the beginning of uncleanness. Okay. So I guess really the hardest part is trying to determine a timeline for all this. But if we were to conduct a chronological recap on the events in consecutive order, if we try to look up these events in order, we would conclude that a select group of angels, known as the Watchers, began to lust over human women. And after that, their leader, Semyaza, they endeavored to marry human women and live among humankind. And I did not add this to my notes, but there was one guy who wrote a book. I referenced a statement that he made. He says it was Satan's purpose to corrupt the seed of humanity by replacing God's spirit in humanity with the corrupted evil spirit of the fallen ones. Okay? And I didn't put that in my notes so you guys could see, but it's there in my book. So in a nutshell, this is exactly what occurred during the days of Noah. These children produced by a process of unnatural breeding were the Nephilim. Okay, and later they became known as Titans in Greek mythology. They were savage giants who pillaged the earth, compromising the integrity of God's perfect design and his purpose for humanity. But you have to understand that the purpose of studying the Nephilim is not just about giants. It's about an army of rebels who aspired to produce a corrupted form of offspring in their own image for the purpose of ruling the world. Okay? That's what chapter 5 of my book explains further in detail, is what would eventually occur later. All right? So in the process of time, many generations of Nephilim produced hybrids of their own. Okay? So it wasn't just, there were first generation Nephilim, and then there were second generation. You have all these different, you have like Titans and Olympians and Anunnaki or Anunnaki, depending on how you want to pronounce it. I'm not the expert here, but I read it first as Anunnaki. So it kind of has like a Lord of the Rings sound to it when you pronounce it that way. And maybe that's why I like pronouncing it that way. It kind of sounds like the Dunadai. But anyway, Noah, he lived in this corrupted era, okay? And it was from the days of Jared to the days of Noah, all right? Until God caused the deluge, the worldwide flood, to rid the earth of these humanoid hybrids, okay? Uriel and he was the angel that was sent to warn Noah about this in efforts to prevent a total eradication of the human race. Okay, Noah found favor in the eyes of God. He was found favorable, not just because he was a righteous soul, but because he was genetically pure. Okay, that's a big deal. That going forward, this is a big deal. And I'm going to say something. I just watched Aaron Sampson give this. I was in and out. I wish I could have just sat down and watched the whole thing. He goes on for a while. It's very in depth. It was Take on the World 2020, and I'm sure it's going to be. They're going to separate all these segments and put them in videos. But he was talking about the DNA and the blood types, and I don't know. If you knew all that, what he was talking about, it might fill in a lot of the gaps of the things that I'm talking about. But I did not know he knew all of that information. It was really good. I will have to go back and just sit down, block everything else out, and just take some notes or something. Anyway, after the flood, we have record of more giants roaming the earth, okay? And of course, the most notorious is Goliath. He was a Philistine. Well, gosh, I need to separate this. I'm going to say a few more things, and then I'll cut this video off. I'm going to make a third part to this. Okay. So, yeah, after the flood, there were more giants, okay? There's genealogies throughout Scripture and the sacred ancient texts, and so we're able to determine that Noah's son Ham most likely married a woman who carried the corrupted genes onto the ark. And I don't do well to explain this. I know people can. Like I would refer you to Rob Skiba and guys like that who are a lot more seasoned in this. They can articulate themselves a lot better when it comes to explaining the whole Sethite theory versus the Ham's wife. Okay, I feel like I just listened to something this past week about it, and now I can't remember because I have so much going in and out every day. But yeah, Ham's wife most likely had those corrupted genes when they all entered the ark, okay? Because it was their offspring, Ham and his wife, whose nations were populated with giants when you read later in the Bible, okay? And they were also the same nations that God commanded the Israelites to destroy throughout the different conquests, you know, like in Joshua's day, when they were invading Canaan, Moses and Joshua, they were destroying all these other nations. Okay, and I even have it on the screen right now. You know, it's showing that, hey, completely destroy them, the Hittites, the Amorites, the Canaanites, you know, as the Lord your God has commanded you. Otherwise, they'll teach you to follow the detestable things that they do in worshiping their gods, and you will sin against the Lord your God. So a lot of people feel like, you know, how can you serve a God who ordered all these mass genocides? And I guess before I thought it was just because of those detestable things they were doing and worshiping their gods, like child sacrifice, which is part of it, okay? But until I learned about the Nephilim and this hybrid, this breeding and this bloodline study, that it made sense because God was protecting the messianic bloodline. He forbid all of these people he forbid his people to marry outside of that line that he was protecting to raise up the Christ. Okay, so yeah, destroy all these other nations. It's like and people talk about a cosmic chess game, and that's really what it is like. You know, strategies from both ways. Okay. And I will leave you with that. I'm getting into the Rephaim next, and we'll talk about the dead things. So I hope this fills you in. If you are already familiar with this, then you could probably give me pointers on this stuff. You could teach me something. I'm just kind of going through what I wrote down in my book, the notes that I made, and I'm sharing with people. Hopefully it's been insightful for some of you who have not heard this before. If so, give me a like or comment or share the video even. I don't care. But thanks again, guys.